You know, when you think of a classic English market town, you probably picture something quiet, maybe a bit sleepy. And on the surface, that's Bury St. Edmunds. But trust me, don't let that charming facade fool you. This is where the story of England, and yeah, even America, was secretly written. We're talking about connections you would just never, ever expect.
So, a French queen, America's first colony, and England's darkest trial. What in the world could possibly link all of those? Well, the answer isn't some famous person or a single battle. It's a place. One small town in Suffolk. Yep, Bury St. Edmunds is the surprising center of this incredible, sprawling web of stories. So let's pull back the curtain and figure out how it all fits together.
All right, here's our game plan. First up, we're diving into a mythic tale of a saint and a wolf, the town's origin story. Then we'll get into some serious drama, royalty, rebellion, and a fight for freedom that changed everything. After that, things take a dark turn with England's biggest witch trial, and we'll wrap it all up by digging into some of the most bizarre and wonderful secrets this town has been hiding.
Okay, first things first. To really get what Bury St. Edmunds is all about, you have to go way back to the beginning. And I mean, this is a story that sounds more like a fairy tale than actual history. The town's whole identity, even its name, is built on this incredible legend of a martyred king, a surprisingly loyal wolf, and the gigantic abbey that was built in their honor.
So check out this timeline. We start way back in 869 AD with King Edmund's martyrdom. A couple of centuries later, this magnificent abbey pops up and becomes one of the biggest monasteries in England. But what's really wild is the sheer scale of it all. For almost 500 years, the abbey wasn't just in Bury St. Edmunds, it pretty much was the town. I mean, imagine a powerhouse controlling everything: land, law, politics. It was one of the wealthiest places in all of Europe. And then, boom, 1539. Henry VIII comes along, and the whole thing comes crashing down. I mean, literally dismantled, stone, by order of the king.
And this is where that whole saint and wolf thing comes in. It's the founding myth, and man, is it a good one. So the story goes, after King Edmund was executed by the Danes, his followers couldn't find his head. They're searching everywhere, and suddenly they hear a voice calling out from the woods. And what do they find? A giant wolf. But instead of, eating the head, it's gently guarding it. This story, this miracle, was a complete game changer. It turned a local king into a national saint, and his burial place became a massive pilgrimage site. That's what brought in all the money and the power to build that incredible abbey.
Okay, so now we have this hugely powerful abbey. And you know what happens when one group has all the power, right? Conflict. It was pretty much inevitable. For centuries, the story of Bury St. Edmunds was just this massive tug of war. On one side, you had the abbey with its absolute feudal control, and on the other, you had the regular townspeople, living in its shadow, who were starting to demand a little thing called freedom.
Now I want you to burn this year into your brain. 1214. It might just look like a number, but it is an absolutely pivotal moment. Because in 1214, something went down inside that very abbey church, something that would send shockwaves across the entire kingdom and, no exaggeration, help shape the future of Western democracy.
That's right. We all know about the Magna Carta being signed in 1215, right? Well, a year before that, the whole rebellion was born right here. A bunch of powerful barons, totally fed up with the tyrannical King John, met secretly in Bury St. Edmunds. They gathered at the altar of St. Edmunds and swore an oath that they would force the king to accept a charter of liberties. So yeah, this little town, it was basically the birthplace of one of the most important legal documents in the history of the world.
And this really breaks down that central conflict, that tug of war I was talking about. So on one side, you've got the abbey's absolute power. They control the town, they're the law, they control all the trade. But on the other side, the townspeople are starting to get organized, they're getting wealthier, forming guilds, and they're starting to think, hey, maybe we should have a say in how things are run. This wasn't just some polite debate, you guys. It got ugly. It boiled over into open revolt, like the Great Riot of 1327, when the townspeople literally stormed the abbey gates. It was intense.
And the town's connections went all the way to the top. Get this, St. Mary's Church is the final resting place of Mary Tudor, Queen of France, and more importantly, the favorite sister of King Henry VIII. Think about the irony for a second. The sister of the very king who had smashed the abbey to pieces chose to be buried right here. It just goes to show you, even as that whole medieval world was crumbling, Bury St. Edmunds was still a place of huge importance, tangled up in all that royal power and Tudor family drama.
All right, but as one era ends, another, much darker one begins. The abbey's power is gone,
But what fills the void? Chaos. England gets plunged into a brutal civil war, and with that comes this intense climate of fear and religious anxiety. It was the perfect storm. A new kind of persecution was about to take hold. As the witch craze swept across Europe, it landed in Bury St. Edmunds with terrifying force, and it led to the single largest witch trial in all of English history.
And at the center of this whole tragedy was one man, Matthew Hopkins. This guy gave himself the title Witchfinder General. He wasn't an official judge, not at all. He was an opportunist, a con man who preyed on fear. He went from town to town, finding witches, extracting confessions, usually through sleep deprivation and torture, and he did it all for cash. When he showed up in Bury St. Edmunds in 1645, he basically unleashed a tidal wave of paranoia and terror.
And this is the result. 18. On just one day, August 27th, 1645, 18 people were hanged as witches in this town. Just let that sink in. It's an absolutely staggering number, and it really shows you the kind of mass hysteria that had taken hold.
And of those 18 people, 16 of them were women. It's a really important detail because it just highlights the deeply misogynistic nature of these witch hunts. The most vulnerable people in society, poor women, old women, widows, they became the easiest targets for all that fear and suspicion.
But you know, even in all this darkness, there were voices of reason. This quote here is from a later critic, a guy named Francis Hutchinson, and he's looking back at the trial of a woman named Amy Dunny. He just perfectly picks apart the so-called evidence against her, which was basically that a cart got stuck near her house. He calls it what it is, ridiculous. It's such a powerful reminder that even when it seemed like the whole world was going mad, not everyone bought into the hysteria. Okay, so we've been through the dark stuff, but the story of this town is so much more than that. So let's shift gears completely and explore a totally different side of Bury St. Edmunds. This is where the history gets, well, weird and wonderful. It's a place of surprising firsts and some truly enchanting folklore.
I mean, just look at this list of random connections. You've got a local guy, Bartholomew Gosnold, who sails across the Atlantic and founds Jamestown. Yeah, that Jamestown, America's first permanent English settlement. Then you've got Charles Dickens, who was a regular visitor and even featured the town in his novel The Pickwick Papers. Oh, and it's also home to Britain's very first internally lit-up road sign. And an early sundial used to set clocks to Greenwich Mean Time. It is just this hotbed of weird, unexpected history.
And the local legends, they are absolutely off the charts. You've got the story of the Green Children of Woolpit, two kids with green skin who supposedly just emerged from the earth, speaking a language nobody understood. Then there's the Burr's dragon, a terrifying beast that terrorized a nearby village. Some historians actually think it might have been an escaped crocodile from the Tower of London. But my absolute favorite has to be Maud Carew. She's the ghost of a murderous nun from a novel. She was completely made up, but the book predicted she'd appear in the churchyard on a certain night, and it caused a real-life riot. Huge crowds showed up, waiting for a fictional ghost. You just can't make this stuff up.
So when you put it all together, Bury St. Edmunds is like a perfect little microcosm of history, isn't it? It's a town of saints and rebels, queens and witchfinders, innovators and storytellers. And it's just amazing proof that any place, no matter how quiet it seems on the surface, can be hiding the most incredible stories. Which really just leaves you with one final question, right? How many layers of history, the epic struggles, the dark secrets, the strange wonders, are hidden right under your own feet?